Welcome to the Dynasty One podcast. I'm your Welcome to the Dynasty One podcast. I'm your host, Carl Safchik, and tonight I am joined by the lone Ezekiel Elliott for MVP voter, and that's Eric Carter. How you doing tonight, Eric?
Well, we're kind of on the same wavelength here because I was going to say I hope I'm not the running back of the podcast because I want you to actually value my presence.
Oh, you're definitely the running back. You come in for spurt. You're like the spell back at this point. You just came in after a long hiatus. What is this? Your third show back out of four?
Third show out of four. So it's I'm there. I'm better than Darren McFadden is.
You're definitely a running back by committee, but you're earning your touches.
Yeah. I'm basically working with Alex Smith right now here at host. So I'm
Alex Smith and you're Frank Gore.
Doing what I can here.
All right. Well, there's not really much to talk about in terms of news. We're going to kind of wing that for a few minutes before being joined by Scott Fish. I don't know. Have we ever had him on this show? I don't think we have.
I don't know that we have.
He worked with, I think, Pepsi for a long time, and he's not working with them anymore, and he's going to be talking about where he is working, which is more important. But that was always a weird time. It was always tough to get him on because of nights. But if you don't know Scott Fish, he's one of the great friends of the website, great friends with everybody at Dynasty One, just genuinely one of the nicest guys in the business. Somebody who, if you don't know Scott Fish, you know somebody who knows him, or you've played in one of his leagues, or somehow, some way, he's touched your fantasy life, has been a part of it in some way. But I don't want to gush too much. I'll save that.
Well, I want to gush a little as well.
Oh,
I think that if we have a dynasty Rushmore, Scott Fish is definitely on it. And, we have 5 degrees or 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like you said, if you play fantasy, it's probably 1 degree of Scott Fish. Scott Fish, or a guy who knows Scott Fish.
Yeah, I want to do one of those dynasty Rushmores one time. Maybe maybe I'll do voting for it or something. I think he's up there. I think there's a couple other obvious.
I think you are definitely an honorable mention for Dynasty One Mount Rushmore.
I thought you were actually going to give me a compliment for once.
No, please, come on.
I mean, I'm one of the 4 people that started Dynasty One. You'd think
That's
I'd be
true,
on Mount Rushmore. All right. Before we do get started, as always, we ask you for you to recommend the show, for you to rate it, for you to subscribe. Leave a review. But this week also we're asking if anybody out there is interested in writing about fantasy football. Even if you don't have any experience, our editor Jacob Gell and I will work with you. You can email the show at dynastyOnefantasy@gmail.com. That's dynasty, the number 1 fantasy@gmail.com. We're looking for writers. If you have experience, great. If you don't, like I said, we'll work with you. But we're definitely looking for writers, and it's a great team. It's me, Eric. If you've probably heard Jesse on the show before, he just put out a new article. I wanted to pimp it, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It came out literally hours before we started the show. Josh, Shane, Jason, Jarrett to a lesser degree, but he's still lurking behind the scenes. It's really a great team to be a part of, if I could say so myself.
Yeah, and just to expand on that a little bit, when you write for a website, it's all you really run the spectrum of what you can contribute and what you're willing to contribute. For me, writing is more of a hobby at this point, just with real life being busy. There are people who do it more for a living, and I think we're somewhere in that intermediate gray area, between the two. But if it's something you're passionate about, I think it was Jody Smith who tweeted within the past week, and Jody's a good friend of the show, and he basically said, if you want to write about fantasy football, about dynasty football, just write something, get out there, just do it, live your life, Yeah.
And if this is going to sound kind of harsh, but even if it isn't good enough, we're willing to work with you. We're willing to say, you could do this better. And for all the great things I'll say about DLF, and they really do run a great organization over there. The one thing I wish they did differently from day one is tell me, hey, Carl, this might not have been as great. I think Ken Kelly is like probably like too nice of a guy. Sometimes he's like, great article, Carl. And there were probably times he could have said, Carl, you could do better in these areas. So that's one thing that we've changed when we came over here is that we're gonna try to make you better. And not to say that they don't. It's just something that we concentrate on. But you mentioned Jody Smith. I went on his podcast this week.
Nice.
Yeah, he
I saw the aftermath, the picture that he tweeted out.
Okay,
NTIPs.
That's what I was going to get at. I guess I'm a bad influence. I had one. He had like 6, and that was a lot of fun. And I just
He's from Texas. He can handle it.
Yeah, and I just did RotoViz Radio before this. So if you're looking for podcasts to check out Old School Fantasy Football Pod with Jody Smith and RotoViz Radio. I was just on there with Pat Crane. Both fun shows. All right. Well, we got to find some stuff to talk about. How about this? Let's start with this. We'll put a dynasty spin on it though, but we'll start with Ezekiel Elliott. I saw you had some thoughts on my I guess argument, my debate on Twitter earlier.
Yeah, so Carl is very vehemently opposed to the Cowboys drafting strategy last year of selecting Zeke Elliott 4th overall when Jalen Ramsey was there, and I think he went 1 pick after.
Yeah,
right?
he did. One pick after.
And I agree with you to the extent that I think Jalen Ramsey is a stud, and he was probably the only player there, in my opinion, who could have created like a similar type impact. Because obviously Goff, well, he hasn't done much. Goff and Wentz were gone, and Bosa would have been the other guy who had like a gigantic rookie year of the guys that we expected. Obviously, we had like your Dak Prescotts, but nobody, and your Jordan Howards, but nobody was really expecting that. So for me, it's pretty simple. I am not as anti-running back as you are. I don't believe it's a replaceable position. Actually, the numbers kind of bear that out in terms of day 3 running backs. It's kind of romanticized how useful they are, but in reality, it's under 25% of those guys who even and I know it's kind of, we have that overlap between real life football and fantasy football. Obviously, there is an overlap. If you're better at real life football, you're probably a better fantasy prospect too. So just speaking in terms of fantasy, those day 3 running backs to even just be like a spot starter is 1 in 4 at best. And if you found a stud over the past 5 years, that means you had Howard or Devontae Freeman. There were no other stud running backs. They came from rounds 4 through 7. So Zeke, he did everything you wanted. He led the league in rushing by several hundred yards while sitting out the last game. And I think I'll leave you with this, and this is kind of a question to you. Why is it that everybody says, I think the popular one is Derrick Henry. Everyone says if you put Derrick Henry behind that O-line, he would have had the same results. My question to you is, if we put insert X receiver here in the high-powered New Orleans offense, why doesn't he do what Michael Thomas did? How comes we never hear that?
Well,
is Michael Thomas a better wide receiver than Zeke Elliott as a running back? I don't think he is.
It's probably similar.
So, but we never hear that argument for Michael Thomas. We never hear that Michael Thomas is a system receiver or Drew Brees, made Michael Thomas. It's that like the O-line apparently made Zeke Elliott.
Well, the Drew Brees does make that offense go.
Now, he does, but this guy's a first rounder in Dynasty now.
You can't plug and play. You can't plug and play as much. But you got Marcus Colston. If he went to another team, would he have had the career that he did as a 7th rounder?
That's a great question.
Does he even make a team? You got guys like Devery Henderson and Lance Moore. Do these guys make an impact on the Rams last year?
Probably not. Jimmy Graham was making an impact on the Seahawks, though.
But the thing with, obviously, I think Jimmy Graham's a generational talent at his position. But if you take Michael Thomas and put him on a different team, I think Michael Thomas is really good. The fact that he's with Drew Brees is what makes him a great fantasy asset. I think Ezekiel Elliott's really good. But what makes him great is being with the Dallas Cowboys O-line with a good quarterback. I don't think he does that in 2015 with Matt Castle or in 2016 with the Rams offensive line and Jared Goff as a quarterback. it really is just a more replaceable position. And you can say that about wide receiver a little bit if we're talking about just NFL value. But I do think you could say pretty much the same thing about Michael Thomas as you do with Ezekiel Elliott.
So I think it's interesting, though, because if you take every other running back carry from the Cowboys that was not from a running back named Zeke Elliott, it was 3.9 yards per carry, and that was about 100 carries. So that's not a trivial sample size. Zeke Elliott was at 5.1 yards per carry. So I don't think that, I do agree that there is something to be said for, like, for example, you look at D'Angelo Williams when he came in for Le'Veon Bell. Is he as good as Le'Veon Bell? No, he's not, but he was able to have some big games, caught the ball a little bit. Maybe his efficiency wasn't quite as good as Le'Veon Bell, but, there is still an inherent drop-off, in my opinion. And I think I look at the example of a guy like Derrick Henry, and maybe he will be a very good pro. I think that's still, the jury's out on that, but I don't think he has like the wiggle that Zeke Elliott does. I don't think he has quite the lateral agility that, I think he's a little bit more Leonard Fournette-esque, and that's not a bad thing because I think Leonard Fournette will be a very good player as well. But I just think Zeke has a little bit of that extra maneuverability in the backfield that is going to set him apart. And if he can start catching a few more passes, I mean, I just have a really hard time saying that, like, the guy who led the league in rushing by several hundred yards was a bad pick solely because Jalen Ramsey was there.
All right. Well, we're getting off the fantasy side of it, and we'll agree to disagree there so we can get back. But I do agree. I agree that Ezekiel Elliott probably will get more targets last year. Caught over 3 out of 4 targets that went his way. And I was actually just watching him today. Ironically, I was tweeting about him before turning on the game, but watching the Cowboys and Steelers game from last year in week 9 or 10, I believe. And he's a capable pass catcher. So there's even a higher ceiling for him in the fantasy landscape than what we saw last year. If he could do what he did, like even if he has the all-purpose yards he did this year, like pretty much the same, adding in 10 to 12 more catches, that's another point per game in fantasy.
So I agree. We are getting a little bit off base, although I think you and I both agree that there is obviously a lot of parallel between NFL and fantasy. But
sure.
I want to ask you a question, and this came a little bit from our D1 chat. I saw someone was talking about the Bears receivers, and I remembered that Roto World blurb about Marcus Wheaton or whoever it was saying like they were going to be great this year. And I don't know that I would go that far, but I want to kind of segue into a tangent and ask you a question, because I actually have an ongoing rookie draft right now for one of my home leagues, which is a 10-team Superflex. And I came back in at pick 17 when I was not traded back in because Mitchell Trubisky was still there. Since we're talking about the Bears, I want to get your thoughts about where do you see them going and why would the number 2 overall pick in the draft last until pick 17 in the Superflex league?
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You said it's a 10-team league, though?
10-team league, and all the other 3 quarterbacks, including Kaiser, had already gone.
Oh, wow. I think you could throw all 4 of those guys in a hat for me, but I did a super flex mock with our friend Kevin O'Brien the other day, and I went up and got Mitchell Trubisky actually as my 3rd quarterback. Yeah, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. We as talent evaluators in the fantasy industry, or even real NFL talent evaluators, we're not very good. Even NFL GMs have a very low hit rate of selecting guys that will end up being good for their team. So, but the NFL talent evaluators are better than us. And when an NFL team selects a player 2nd overall, you have to consider that they know something. And they're not the only team that wanted Mitchell Trubisky. There were stories that the 49ers really did. When they traded back, they didn't even know that the Bears were going to take Mitchell Trubisky. So they thought they might be trading back and still getting their guy. And many of the, Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, those type guys really like Mitchell Trubisky. There's not a lot of reason I could see him falling to 17. I would consider him probably around the 8 range in a super flex.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a trade where I don't have much depth in this league, but I have high-end starters. I have Luck and I have Dak Prescott, who I really lucked into in the last round of our draft last year because I had Romo. And I'm like, let me just take this kid Prescott. This was before he blew up in the preseason.
Well, you lucked into Prescott. Did you Prescott into Luck? All right, that was lame.
Yeah, that was terrible. Our editors will have to do something there.
Try to catch it. It didn't work.
But I literally just looked at it, like you were saying, as I do not know more than the NFL GMs. And I looked at it as a cost-benefit analysis, and the way the trade worked out, I didn't have to give up a future first. That would have been my sticking point. I wasn't going to give up a future first for Mitchell Trubisky. But I'm like, if I blow the trade, who cares? The number 17 pick in the draft didn't go my way, but I just thought it was a gamble it was a logical gamble that just made sense to take to me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I like all those guys. I love Kaiser in Cleveland, Watson in Houston. A lot of people talk about his ball velocity. He made it work in college. I don't think, you would like to see the number higher. Obviously, I don't know that that's something that's going to stop him from succeeding in the NFL. And Mahomes he's the wild card of all 4 of them. I think he could be an absolute flop. He really could, but he could be the next Brett Favre. That's obviously
for better or for worse.
Yeah, lofty expectations, but he's that type of player. I don't know. I'm not putting Hall of Fame expectations on him. What I'm saying is he's that type of player. So, these guys, I'll take whoever goes fourth. And in your case, you got the 4th quarterback, which actually went first in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, with regard to Mahomes and versus a guy like Watson, that's always a tough debate for me. Because if you have a guy who doesn't have a huge arm, you're kind of hoping that he becomes the next Drew Brees or something like that. Even a guy like Chad Pennington was a very serviceable quarterback for many years before his injuries. But man, you can hopefully teach a guy to become a better quarterback, but you cannot teach physical traits. So that's why I look at a guy like Mahomes and a guy like Kaiser and even a guy like Trubisky with some of that potential rushing ability as well. And I'm just like, I'm going to probably lean towards that a little bit versus like one of those quote unquote winners who might not have the best measurables.
I don't know. You could have said that Tom Brady didn't have the measurables. We didn't see much out of him in college. You could say that, Drew Brees, I don't know if he had the measurables. The guys that understand how to play the game at the quarterback position specifically, I think that's an underrated trait.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's maybe like 55-45 to me. Like I value them both relatively equally. Maybe it's better to say I'll use the physical tools as a tiebreaker if I have guys like Watson and Mahomes ranked back to back.
Yeah, and with other positions, I think athleticism is huge. Like, obviously Cleveland's putting a lot into athleticism with getting Corey Coleman and David Njoku and why am I missing on his name? The safety from Michigan, Jabril Peppers. They're putting a lot into getting physical traits. Obviously, Deshaun Kaiser has that as well. All right, well, let's transition off that for a second. How about Jay Gruden gushing about Jamison Crowder? There was a poll up the other day. I saw a couple of my league mates jump into this poll on Twitter. A guy asked, what would you give for Jamison Crowder? A first, a second, a third, or a fourth? Yeah, so, I mean, everybody said first, obviously, but let's break it down to what you would give for Crowder specifically and what you expect from him in the future.
So this is interesting because you and I talked about this 3 or 4 weeks ago or whatever it was, that if you include the 3 receivers, that's Crowder, Pryor, and Doxson, and also the tight end Jordan Reed, they have 4 guys in like the top 65 or so in terms of ADP. And they just drafted P. Ryan. They have Rob Kelly sticking around. They have Chris Thompson sticking around. That's a lot of mouths to feed. So something is going to have to give. And maybe it will be a Jordan Reed injury. Who knows? Maybe because Terrell Pryor only has a 1-year contract, you're not going to have to worry about it past 2017. But I just don't know who to pick from those guys for the upcoming year. All things being equal, I think Reed is the most talented. And so I would, if he could stay healthy, he would be the guy I want. Crowder, I think, has the most certain volume because he's going to be in 2 wide receiver sets, and he's going to have the most defined role, I think, in 3 wide receiver sets. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he could have 80 to 90 receptions. And he's not going to be like a huge chain mover, but he can definitely break 1,000 yards with that. I think his touchdowns are going to regress a little bit, especially with Pryor there now. So I don't know. I'd probably say definitely after the big 6, but maybe in that like 10. I think I would take like John Ross, and he would be pretty close. So I guess we would say anywhere from like the 107, I would start considering it.
What if I told you he got 118 targets?
That he's going to get 118 targets,
yeah.
or
yeah.
Because
I think that's probably his floor this year.
Yeah, I just don't know. What did he probably catch? Like 70% of his passes or so last year?
68.
Okay, so yeah, so we're talking about, again, probably that 80 to 90 reception range. So I think that's kind of what I would foresee. So yeah, I feel like that 107 to 108 is probably right around the point that my price point personally for Crowder.
Yeah, if he's getting 80, 90 catches, you got to consider him there or higher, I think. Yeah. All right, well, we did enough BSing. There just wasn't a lot of news. I don't want to waste any more time. Everybody probably came here for Scott Fish, so let's give him some Scott Fish. All right. I just done it.
Oh, God.
I keep getting these emails. This person's name is James Bianco. I'll just read the first email I got and tell me if you think it's spam or if you think it's real. Hey, Carl Safchik. Hope your week is going well. I came across your site and love your content. Unfortunately, it was pretty hard to find and looks like a major hassle. Is it made with WordPress? As an old WordPress user, I understand how time-consuming it is, so I took it upon myself to help you out. I already made a quick and interesting mock-up of Dynasty One Fantasy on Versed. Versed is a much more powerful web publishing platform that is constantly user-tested to be seamless and easy. Want me to send over the URL? Talk to you soon. James Bianco.
I don't know. That could go either way. The name doesn't really sound familiar.
No.
Did you like look him up on Twitter or anything?
No. Actually, I'm just going to say yes, send it on over. I don't know why you just wouldn't include the URL, though.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Second email. Ready to send the mock-up? Oh, hi, Carl Safchik. How's it going? Ready to send the mock-up when you are. Smiley face.
Huh.
You'll be able to log in and play around with it, too. Here's a 30-second product video that showcases our platform's capabilities to get you up to speed. So he's definitely trying to sell something.
Right.
If you don't like the platform, don't worry. Switching platforms doesn't mean starting over. We have a team of engineers that can seamlessly ingest your current content to make it look beautiful.
Interesting.
Let's look. I'm going to watch this video. Is Scott here yet?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
There he is.
What's up, Scott?
Oh, man.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
I can barely hear you. Let me see if I can turn on.
I could just yell really loud if you want.
No, I have it. I need to put.
Are you sure?
Okay, there we go.
It's good to have you on. I don't think have we ever had you on D1?
Yep. I've been on once. I was on once last year, and then the time that didn't work.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What didn't your power go out or something?
Yeah. My internet went down. And
That's right.
Came back up in like 20 minutes, but it was already too late.
But I was like, I left to go get food or something.
Yeah.
I remember that.
By food, you mean beer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, we just did a little quick news and notes, and we're just ready to bring you on. There's probably 1,000 things we have to talk about. So
nice. Let me put you on the big screen. All right. There we go. Boom. You're huge.
take in all this.
Yeah. After I got this new job, I decided I needed a second monitor here at home because I have one at work, and it's so much nicer.
Oh, it's so much better. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get you on so we can talk about that because I do want to talk about it.
Perfect.
All right. Now we are joined by Scott Fish. I mentioned earlier, if you don't know Scott, I don't know what rock you've been living under. At Scott Fish 24, because there were 23 Scott Fishes other than the Scott Fish you're talking to now. Scott, you have a big announcement that you've already put out on Twitter, but just in case anybody hasn't heard it yet, why don't you fill us in on it?
Yeah, I just recently started full-time in the fantasy football industry. In January, I was approached by 2 different companies to be a full-time fantasy analyst, and I took one of those jobs, and I started at the start of this month, June 1st. I started working full-time doing fantasy football stuff, which never thought that would happen. I honestly didn't.
Well, what's the site, man?
Oh, it's fanball.com. We are relaunching Fanball. Fanball and League Safe are like the same company, so Safe Leagues, League Safe, Fanball, all of that. I work for it all. It's really awesome. It's such a great vibe to be working with a company that's, got this great, amazing track record, and we have 4 FFWA Hall of Famers involved in it, but also that's kind of almost got that startup feel as well because it's relaunching. It's making its way back into the industry.
Awesome. And so what else you got going? There's so much I want to promote. Obviously, you just got a job. That's awesome. Talk about Fantasy Cares. Talk about Scott Fishbowl.
Oh yeah, I have about 65 things going on. It feels like at all time. I recently took over Safe Leagues, which is a commissioner service run by my company. So I'm trying to sell these orphan dynasty teams and run these leagues. And then I have Fantasy Cares that I run best ball redraft leagues for charity, and all that money goes to buying toys for kids every Christmas.
Toys for Tots, right?
For Toys for Tots. Yep. I go out and I go to a Toys R Us and I just buy cartful after cartful after cartful, and I take lots of pictures, and we just donate them to the kids. It's so amazing just to think about all those kids getting those toys.
Awesome.
And I suppose I got Scott Fishbowl too.
Sure. Yeah, tell us about, because this is probably the biggest fantasy football league out there, right? Like the most people in it, you would think.
If you count the satellites, it's not even close. I've had people in the past talk to me saying, the Reddit Narwhal League is bigger, but that's actually, it doesn't have a combined playoffs. It's just a bunch of leagues, and they take, the highest scoring guy and give him the championship, right? So it's just a bunch of separate leagues, and they don't ever combine. Right. This one actually combines everyone from every different league and every different division. So on its own, it's the largest. But even if you count my satellites, which run kind of like the Narwhal League, if you count the satellites for SFB, there's thousands that play in this league.
And talk about it. What is the Scott Fishbowl for those who don't know?
Oh, sure. It's a 720 team pro-am. 480, 500 analysts, something like that, 200 and some fans. And basically it runs like your regular league. There's 60 12-team divisions. They run like your regular league for 12 weeks, and then everybody's thrown together in this massive playoffs just to get one winner. It's got just about any analyst you can think of in the industry plays in it.
Yeah.
So are they testing you like for science to see how you can function without sleeping?
Yeah, I honestly don't know how I do it at this point. I don't know where the time comes from. I must have there's like this vortex around my house where there's this 28-hour day that I work.
Yeah, I see all the things they're out there doing, and then I see like Ryan McDowell, and he's like, "Oh, light day today. I only wrote 3 articles." Geez, you guys are crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it's fun. It's fun when it's your passion. It doesn't exactly feel like work all the time.
Right. So, because you're the guest here, and it's been a little while since we've done a Dynasty Mystery Man, I was going to see if you wanted to try and take a stab at one of these guys, Scott.
Oh, let's do it.
All right. So I have a guy. I have 5 clues about him, and then I'll go ahead and let you guess. So number 1.
Okay.
This player led his team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns last year. Number 2, he turned 66% of his receptions, parentheses, 40% of his targets into first downs. He will be only 27 years old entering the season. In the year prior, in 2015, he averaged 10.9 yards per target, and on only 61 targets, finished as the PPR wide receiver 51. And then in 2016, finished as the PPR wide receiver 19. And his ADP is 125.3.
I think I know this one.
Okay. You said he led his team in touchdowns last year?
Touchdowns, yards, and receptions.
Oh, geez. Wow. I really don't know.
What's his ADP this year?
125.3 right now.
Wow. Oops. Sorry.
And there's a really good reason why his ADP is what it is.
Okay. I see now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you can't guess it, Scott, let's.
I don't have it.
All right. Well, let's leave it for obviously people are just going to look up the
ADP. This one's pretty easy getting the ADP. So this is Rashard Matthews.
Oh, so that makes sense.
They drafted a couple of guys. They brought in Eric Decker, and that might not even be baked into his ADP yet, actually, because that was so recent. But I think, Carl, you were talking a couple of weeks ago that the Titans kind of have an out with his contract, that they could cut bait come 2018. So, I mean, he's still a relatively young dude, and he's had a couple productive seasons now. So I think he's a kind of a sneaky buy low right now.
I think so, too. I really want to see that. Now that you mentioned it, and he's already at 129, I really want to see what his Dynasty ADP goes to after Eric Decker had already signed.
Wow, yeah. I really see. I've jumped really into redraft mind that jumping back to Dynasty for a night here is interesting. But yeah, Rashard Matthews. Oof.
Is he even draftable in redraft right now? Do you think?
Yeah, they're both getting drafted. So, okay. But in Dynasty, yeah, there's a lot of question marks there in Tennessee for the future.
Yeah, I mentioned I was talking about Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray. Well, obviously, there's been a lot of Derrick Henry talk today with talking about Ezekiel Elliott. Did you get into any of the debates today about Ezekiel Elliott, Scott? Did you see any of that going on?
I did not. I didn't see any of it. Fill me in.
It was just the age-old tale of me pissing off Cowboys Twitter.
Nice.
Saying that they should have taken Jalen Ramsey ahead of Ezekiel Elliott.
And then me jumping in and subtweeting Carl whenever I can.
Eric subtweets me all the time. First of all, he just might as well just at me, right? Second of all, like, you're going to talk to me about it soon anyway.
Yep.
Third of all, I scroll through Twitter like a madman, so it's not as if I'm not going to see it.
You should set notifications on your phone for Eric's tweets just so you always know.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I don't see Carl face to face. It's because I Twitter tough guy at him all the time, and then if I see him, he's gonna be like, "You want to catch some fists, bro?"
He avoids me. He lives like 5 minutes away from me. We work 5 minutes away.
You better watch out, or he'll run train on you.
There it is. I didn't even have to say it.
That has instantly become an iconic moment in the show.
Oh boy.
I think a lot of people don't realize how many podcasts I listen to, so I get to make these little jokes.
Dude, this happens to me. I don't realize that like legit people in the industry listen to me. So like I go on Jody Smith's show and he's like, "Oh yeah, you remember when you said this 7 weeks ago about this play?" I don't even remember that. Went on RotoViz Radio today and Pat Corain is talking about that, and I'm talking about stuff we said on the show, and I'm like, I don't realize that people actually listen to me. I know the fans do, but
it feels good though, right? It feels good that people listen.
Yeah, actually, and I meant to promote your podcast too. That's one of the other 65 things.
Yeah, I have so many podcasts. I have the Bull Rush podcast, which does really well, like shockingly well. Thank you to all the listeners out there because the numbers are beyond anything I ever imagined. And I also got coming up, I'm going to be part of Fantasy Football Almost Daily. That's a show with like Paul Charchian and John Tuvey and Matt Harrison and Brian Johnson. And then I also have a Fanball podcast that I'm going to be doing 3 times a week coming up. It's unreal.
How many Scott Fishes are there?
This is the first half of this show is all promotion. Sorry about that.
Right. All right. So we brought you on to unveil this new segment called Dynasty Cliffhangers. You're watching a TV show and something big's about to happen and it says to be continued. And, there might be the protagonist against the antagonist and one of them is going to die. Well, kind of similar concept here. These players' ADPs, we need to find these players' ADPs that are going to drastically change in 2017. I think that there's some players that their ADP is safe from going up too high or dropping down too low, but some players are at a crossroads in their careers. So with that being said, I want to start with Eric, actually. I want to hear who he has first, and then we'll go to Scott.
All right, so the guy that I have is actually a guy I touched upon when we had Ray Summerlin and we did our 2015 through 2017 draft, and he was actually my last pick, and that's CJ Procise, and his ADP is at 81 right now. So the big caveat here is he needs to stay healthy, and he hasn't proven the ability to do that yet. Again, we're not medical doctors, but it was not a good sign that he missed so much time in his rookie year. But they brought Eddie Lacy, and people forget he's only on a 1-year deal. Obviously, has his own question marks. Thomas Rawls, I think he's a good player, but I think it's fair to say he doesn't have the trust of the staff because they keep bringing in a bunch of competition for him. So Procise, he has this very limited sample size last year, but he had 380 yards on just 47 touches, 17 receptions on 19 targets. That's a fantastic catch rate. And he busted at least one, big reception, maybe a couple in there. He just looks real natural doing it. So we had 67 targets last year that went to Kristen Michael, CJ Spiller, Alex Collins, Marcel Reese, and then Thomas Rawls got a few as well. So if you can get, 4 to 6 carries a game, which is possible, but supplemented with passing game work, and this is an offense that has been progressively passing more and more, suddenly we're looking at like a bigger, faster Danny Woodhead, and I could easily see him jumping up into like the 30s if he has the year that he's capable of having.
And do you think that conversely, his ADP could fall a lot if he doesn't?
I think he's safer from falling just because people are going to say if Eddie Lacy gets work, well, he'll be gone next year. And, I don't think people just have very high expectations for him, judging by the fact that he's way back there at 81.
Scott, what do you think about CJ Procise?
I actually have him as my highest ranked of the three Seattle backs for redraft, which is a hot take in the redraft community. In the dynasty community, I think he's easily the highest ranked of them.
Yeah,
I'm a bit. I've become more of a fan now that his price is realistic. Last year when he was a rookie, his price was just inhumanly high. It was like, this guy is the next David Johnson, and let's pay for him at that price. But right now, if I was to take a stab at any of those backs, it would probably be Procise at 82. Even though I am a Rawls fan, I am a Rawls fan more than a lot of the community.
All right, who's your first guy, Scott?
I'm going to give you a pair since I I was just kind of got on, and now I think I understand fully what this is.
None of us understand fully what this is. So
okay. I'm going to go with a pair. I think Spencer Ware and Kareem Hunt together are going to hit that. I think one of those two is going to jump, and one of those two is going to drop precipitously.
I like it.
Maybe even early in the season. But once we figure out what's going on there, people love their Andy Reid backs. I know that some people don't agree with that, but I think one's going up and one's going down, and I don't see any way around that.
I really like that. What do you think about that, Eric?
I'm with you 100%. I'm not a huge Spencer Ware fan. I know he started out of the gates really hot, and then he kind of fizzled down the stretch. And he's a big guy, and he can move pretty well for his size, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to hold up as a feature back just because he has a size. And draft capital, what was Hunt, a 3rd-round pick? That's significant draft capital for a running back. So I'm with you. I don't see them coexisting. One of them's gonna. I think if one moves, the other's gonna move in the opposite direction. So I agree completely.
All right, for my first guy, I'm going to talk about Josh Doxson. He has all the tools to be a wide receiver 1 in this league. If he puts together a 1,000-yard season, I think his price is going to skyrocket. On the other hand, he could go the Kevin White route, the Rashad Perriman route, if he doesn't put it together this year. They're already talking about Jamison Crowder being in 2 wide receiver sets. Ryan Grant is practicing with the first team ahead of him. If he can't get it together, he was an old rookie. He's an old sophomore. People aren't going to pay for a 25-year-old third-year player that hasn't put anything good on tape. So I see a scenario in which his value skyrockets, and I see a scenario where his value goes off the cliff, Wile E. Coyote style.
Yeah, we said earlier, Scott, before you came on, that there are 4 Redskins pass catchers going in the top 65 in the ADP right now. Ooh. So obviously, if you factor then the running backs in there, that's a lot of mouths to feed. And we know that Pryor's only on that 1-year deal, but something is going to have to give there.
Oh yeah, definitely. I like that call. It feels, I can't imagine Doxson's value going too much farther down. It feels like it's pretty low already. But
I mean,
yeah.
59 still kind of high.
Oh, it's 59.
Yeah, in Dynasty, yeah, that's a top 6-round pick.
Oh, geez, wow. Yeah, for some reason I thought it was far lower, but I guess I wasn't paying attention to the ADP part on that. Whew.
Yeah, and next year he'll be entering his age 26 season. Now that won't come till later in the season. That his birthday doesn't come until almost the end of the calendar year. But if he doesn't put it together, people are going to start putting that age and production thing, and they're going to mix them up, and I think he's going to fall even further.
You know what? I just thought of one kind of in a similar range. At least I think his range is similar. You guys can verify that. But Amir Abdullah, I feel like there's this little bit of buzz going on for him right now, and I feel like he's the kind of guy that he's either going to make it this year or he's not, and the Lions might have to address that situation again.
Well, I agree. What do you think about that, Eric? I think you've always been an Abdullah fan, right?
I am an Abdullah fan, and obviously I really liked the way that he started out the year last year, but he only played 5 quarters. So there's not too much you can really glean from that, especially when 4 of those quarters were against the Indianapolis Colts, who are one of the worst defenses in the league. And we know that Riddick theoretically is going to be the pass-catching back there. They're still talking up Zach Zenner, I like Abdullah.
Minnesota. Sorry, he's from my town. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I live in Eagan, Minnesota. Zach Zenner, he's from Eagan, Minnesota.
Really?
That's where I live. Yep.
But yeah, he's a guy that I think he's on that precipice, and if he does not show something, he'll be in the triple digits for ADP at this time next year.
Where is he now? 6th round or so?
Well, you nailed it. He's right there with Doxson. He's 61.
I think that's fair.
So
yeah,
5th round. Yeah.
So
yeah, well, first pick in the 6th.
Okay.
For my next guy, I'm going to go with a guy who's a bit more highly rated right now, and that's Devontae Adams. And he had a big year last year, and now he sees his ADP and the later portions of the 3rd round at a little after 32. But if he moving up from 32 to like 15, that's different than moving up from like 110 to 60. That's, basically you can only move up so far if you're already going in the 3rd round. And if he has another big year, I think he could join like right around like that Brandon Cooks level, where people are getting drafted, possibly even a little bit earlier. But he also has some real sneaky regression potential. I think he had 12 touchdowns last year on just 75 receptions. And he actually had, obviously the touchdowns counted, they happened. We can't take that away, but they really did save him. He had 10 games apiece of 4 or fewer receptions and 50 or fewer yards. So His floor could be sneaky low. I'm not a big Randall Cobb fan, but even if he gets some of those touchdowns that Davante Adams had, and they brought in Martellus Bennett, if he plays pretty well, Adams, I don't see him replicating that wide receiver 1 season that he had. And if he finishes as a, I don't know, wide receiver 3 or somewhere around there, I could see him sinking a little bit.
Say that stat again for me. He had 10 games with
4 or fewer receptions
and 50
and 10 games with. So they were not like
they weren't the same 10
stats,
games.
But yeah. So
had 10 games of 50 or fewer yards and or 4 or fewer catches.
Right.
That's pretty damning. I agree with that. There of the top 20 PPR wide receivers last year, all of them went over 1,000 yards except for the wide receiver 9 in Davante Adams.
I mean, he was right there. He had 997.
Right.
Yeah, but was. Yeah.
But everybody around him was 1,200, 1,400. He was unable to crack the I was going to say the century mark. It's obviously not the century mark. What is it, a millennial mark?
Sure.
When you said Davante Adams is the wide receiver 9, is that ADP or where he finished last? Oh my gosh, I was going to say that would be surprising if he was that high in ADP.
Yeah, what do you think about Davante Adams?
I'm probably right in the middle. I know that there's a lot of buzz guys, but I found myself being a guy who wants to buy Randall Cobb at a much, much cheaper price and get some of that Aaron Rodgers production. I think what we saw from Davante Adams is somewhere in between the first year or what we'll see this year is somewhere in between the last 2 years, where he'll continue to be inconsistent. He'll have some good games, but I don't think he's going to put up the numbers that he did last year. He is a threat for double-digit touchdowns, though.
It's funny. We were just talking about Davante Adams. The show was on. He was talking about buying Randall Cobb just because he thinks that Cobb has some positive TD regression as opposed to Davante Adams, who may have some negative. Mm-hmm. The next guy I want to bring up, and I think as many fans as this guy has, I think everybody can agree that his ADP could drop too, as much as people want to say that it could skyrocket. And I'm looking for his ADP right now. I just had it up. And that is Tyreek Hill at 53 overall. I think it could skyrocket. I think it has that ability. I think also if he doesn't get on the field very much and he turns into a Tavon Austin-esque player, somebody who the offensive coordinator is failing to get in space, then his ADP could drop. Do you see that both scenarios as possible, Eric?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I go through Twitter, I think I generally see more anti-Tyreek takes than I see pro-Tyreek takes, and I'm not sure.
We follow different people.
Maybe, and that's what my question is. Am I seeing the vocal minority, or is that sort of the prevalent viewpoint? I guess it must not be if his ADP is consistently going up. Maybe those people just aren't on Twitter spouting their Tyreek Hill hate. But I do agree with you, and I am a Tyreek Hill proponent. He's enough of a lightning rod guy that if he doesn't live up to it, I could see people sort of washing their hands of him a little bit more quickly. But I will allow for the one caveat, which is that, some people, I don't want to say can be somewhat lazy in their analysis because not everybody has time to evaluate every single play. So what are they going to remember? They're going to remember those home run plays. They're going to see those big highlight plays. And Tyreek Hill is going to have a handful of them next year, guaranteed. And it's very easy when you see those plays. I was talking about Procise earlier. He had that 80-yard touchdown reception last year. It's very easy to fall in love with a guy when you see that they have the ability to do that. So I think that could be the one mitigating factor as to maybe why he wouldn't drop off quite as much as you would think.
I think Devontae Parker is one of those players who benefits from highlight plays as well. Scott, just before you give your thoughts on Tyreek Hill specifically, would you agree with me or Eric just about the perception of people on Twitter? Do you think Twitter's more pro-Hill or anti-Hill?
Wow. Well, it definitely seems they're a little more pro-Hill, but they're starting to back off. Is how I've felt about it. I felt like there was this huge amount of hype, and then the Macklin leaving made made Tyreek kind of acceptable at the price he was at. And I think people backed off a little on their hype train of him. But yeah, I think that Eric's statement is right, that guys that make those kind of plays, like you said, Devontae Parker and whatnot, it makes it a sexy player to have on your roster. And that drives ADP, especially in mocks where you don't actually have to live with the results.
Yeah.
So did you want me to drop another one on you? Because I thought of another one while you
drop bombs.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I think this is a huge make or break year for, let's stay in the Midwest. Let's stay with Ty Montgomery. I think I'm not sure what the ADP is, but I can imagine that.
Well, you stole him off my list, so it's 74.2.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, I agree with you.
I'm flying at the seat of my pants here, man. I'm sorry. Maybe you can shed some more information on him here.
No, I think I'm going to agree with what Drew about to say. So,
but I feel that people are baking in just enough risk to make him drop enough. But if he becomes that Packers lead back, he is going to jump into like top 20 RB territory. Or if he dies out and, Aaron Jones or Joe take over for him, he'll be nothing next year. So he's really on a cliff.
Yeah, and the one stat similar to his Packer teammate Devontae Adams, he has a very interesting stat to me as well, which is that he had this 2-game stretch, back-to-back games, where he had 20 combined receptions in those 2 games. So he was just a total beast. And then in every other game, and this is especially kind of crazy for a converted wide receiver, he didn't have any other game over 3 receptions. I'm not saying that can't change, but again, Aaron Jones can catch passes, and we need to see, I think, his carries grow a little bit, because he only had that 1 game with double-digit carries. And, yeah, my fears would just be that they selected a couple of running backs. But, for a guy who picked up the position on the fly, he did pretty well. And if he takes hold of that spot, like you said, people love guys in high-powered offenses, so he could definitely jump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people like to think that they were trying to draft. This goes so many times, so many off seasons this happens. That team needed depth, so that explains those 2 running back draft picks. It might be about Ty Montgomery, but it might not be. So we'll have to wait to find out.
Well, these guys are all stars because they cut Kristen Michael for him.
Nice.
All right, my next guy, I'm going to be a little creative, much like Scott did in picking 2 players. I'm going to pick a player who his value could skyrocket or drop, but it may do that every other year for the rest of his career, and that's Cam Newton. This is a player who's currently the quarterback 7, according to Dynasty ADP. This time last year, June of 2016, he was the quarterback 1. I think QB 7 is a little low for me. He's somebody who I think has, obviously he has the legs to get it done. A lot of people like to point out that quarterbacks stop running well once they hit a certain age. But we're talking about like Steve Young, Michael Vick, Fran Tarkenton, not like an offensive line sized quarterback. I think Cam Newton has the ability to not only be a decent quarterback for the rest of his career, but also keep giving you yards on the ground for the rest of his career. But if he has another year similar to 2016, he could keep dropping. I think as you see, players like Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson jump him. You could see players like Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, maybe even Matt Stafford, some players in that range, or maybe even a couple rookie quarterbacks from this year jump him. So he's definitely a player who has a wide range of outcomes, I think. Scott, what do you think about that?
Thank you for going to me first. The Panthers are one of my teams that I cover, and I definitely wanted to jump in here because when I was researching Cam, I realized every year of his career has been almost exactly the same. 3,300 to 3,800 yards, 19 to 24 touchdowns every year, except for the one outlier year that everybody is, the big play thing. They're like, he had this huge year, so they have all this hype from him. But all the rest of his seasons were last year. Last year was his normal, and he had one amazing year that people want to push into the forefront of their memory. So if you ask me, I'm going to say Cam Newton is going to be a 3,500 yard, 19 to 24 touchdown guy that he's been for 6 of his 7 years. If he gets more than that, nice. But yeah, QB7 feels high for that.
So I feel like, and this is purely anecdotal, and I don't get a chance to see a ton of Carolina games, but it seemed like he took a lot more shots last year than I had seen him take in years previous. And again, this could be purely anecdotal, but he ran a little bit less last year. He lost some of his goal line work, finally, to my boy Jonathan Stewart. So if that is a trend that continues, that's worrisome. But then what happens? We had Curtis Samuel, we had Christian McCaffrey. Can he play that game, more of that short game versus the throw it up and hope that, Funchess or Benjamin can come down with it? Obviously, Ginn's gone now, and who is actually a surprisingly large part of their offense, by the way. So I really don't know what to make of Cam Newton, but I think it's a great pick, Carl, for this segment because he was already a cliffhanger literally in the past year. He didn't follow up that massive year and he dropped a bit. So I could definitely see him sliding down as we see these guys like Derek Carr getting the big money contract and Mariota and Winston getting all these weapons surrounding him. So I think, it's interesting.
I got to disagree with Scott a little bit. Now, admittedly, 2013 was a down year from the quarterback position, but he was the QB3. And then in 2015, while it is a bit of an outlier, he was the QB1. Mm-hmm. So I do agree with your point overall that 2015 is an outlier, but he has another really good season on his resume, at least in terms of fantasy finish in 2013, where he finished 3rd overall.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
now let me caveat with saying that 3rd overall would have been okay. It still would have been 6th this year, so I thought it would have been lower, but that 2013 was a little bit of a down year for quarterbacks not named Peyton Manning and Drew Brees.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say Cam Newton is QB 15 for Dynasty. It's the perception that he's gonna, that his ceiling is something that's more normal, more attainable than I think it is.
Well, what has he been in the league? 4 years? He's been the QB.
This will be year 7, I believe. His first year was 11 because Luck was 2012.
Wow.
So
over the last 4 years, he has a QB1 and a QB3 finish though. Yeah. So I don't think that it's not normal.
Right, and like I said, I mean, he's been a 3,500 yard average over his career or so, and he's been pretty much always been in that 19 to 24 touchdowns. That's not bad, especially when you got a guy that rushes for 5 to 10 touchdowns too. I mean, he's been over 10 twice, but yeah, I mean, he's going to get you yardage on the ground. That helps.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you count not just passing touchdowns, if you're counting rushing touchdowns, he's over that total that you gave. And in some leagues where it's 4 points for a passing touchdown and 6 for a rushing touchdown, which a lot of leagues are that way, you can even kind of give that touchdown total a little bit of a bump.
Do you think? I mean, I'm totally with Eric. He was getting crushed last year. Do you think his running goes down and he tries to dump it off to Samuel and McCaffrey more? Or
sure, his running's going to go down, but I think that the narrative is that it's going to fall off a cliff. And I don't believe that's happening. I don't think that's.
You can't ask him to change his game and have them have the same offense.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, a lot of people compare Cam Newton to past rushing quarterbacks, and we just don't have an example of someone this big. Cunningham was not this big. Steve Young certainly wasn't this big.
No.
We got guys like Tarkenton and
you're looking at like Culpepper.
Yeah, Culpepper. I was going to say is about the only one, and he had a devastating knee injury. Cam hasn't had that.
Right.
And Cam's already throwing again. So
right. So I have an interesting one here. It's Carlos Hyde, whose ADP is right there at 59.7 now.
Now you let us determine if it's interesting or not.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay. So it's been well established now for 2 weeks that Pierre Garçon is going to run train on this offense. So we're not sure what's going to be left for Carlos Hyde, but ostensibly he's the RB1 on that offense. They did take Joe Williams a little bit earlier, I think, than pundits thought he was going to go. And you guys can give me your thoughts on this, but I kind of love Kyle Juszczyk. I think he's like a sneaky guy for maybe not a ton of rushing, but he ran a decently diverse route tree for what was essentially like an H-back converted fullback type of guy. So the thing that really I don't like about Carlos Hyde is I anticipate the 49ers to basically be playing from behind all the time. Like it's going to be a toss-up between them and the Jets, I think, for probably the worst team in the league. And Carlos Hyde was better catching passes last year, but it's never really been a forte of his. So if that happens and game script works against him, I just struggle to see him getting more than the 218 carries he got last year. And, we have a new staff who isn't committed to him. So again, though, if they can somehow get in the positive game script, he was very efficient. So I could see that going either way.
The one thing that sticks out to me with what you said is I also too love Kyle Juszczyk. When Kyle Shanahan said that he lost sleep thinking about Joe Williams falling to him in the 6th round, in my home league, I lost sleep hoping that Kyle Williams fell to me, and I got to pick him in the 7th round of a rookie draft. And I think he's just going to be maybe not this year's Woodhead, because Woodhead was like the running back 2 a couple years ago, but something similar to that.
I mean, he got $10 million guaranteed, which I was very surprised to see. So that's not I know money isn't everything, but I think it at least shows we have designs for this guy in our offense.
Yeah. Wow, definitely. And with that offense, it could be a lot. People automatically think of what it's been for the last few years, but it can turn around pretty quickly.
What do you think about Carlos Hyde specifically, Scott?
I'm probably a little more of a fan of Carlos Hyde than others. I think he has that potential, but I really do think he's on that cliff. Every time I draft him in like the 3rd or 4th round is my RB2 or 3 or whatever I'm doing, and this is obviously redraft, but every time I draft him in these mocks, part of me is like, I can't believe I just did that, just because I'm so scared of what could happen. The upside is an RB1, a legit RB1, but the downside is he becomes nothing. So he's a perfect cliff candidate.
Can I just go back to Juszczyk for a second? Eric, put a realistic stat line up for Juszczyk that you.
A realistic stat line is that I will go 0 for the century in spelling his name correctly on the first.
Oh my
time.
God! I just tried to pull up his stats from last year, and it took me this whole conversation because I spelled it wrong 14 times before I got it.
So I don't think it's crazy to say that he could get, and again, this is pie in the sky, 70 to 100 carries. And, let's say average efficiency 4 to 4.2 yards a pop, maybe some red zone work. But I could see him very easily getting 45 to 50 receptions as well. So the touchdowns will kind of be the swing there in terms of where he finishes and whether or not you trust him on a weekly basis. But again, he was real good catching the ball in Baltimore, and I think they paid him a decent chunk of change.
Yeah, the Ravens throw to their running backs so much, it's unreal. Even after Trestman and even back to the Ray Rice days, and the Ravens have led the league in passing 2 years in a row. They've led the league in pass-to-run ratio 2 years in a row. I mean, there were a lot of passes going everywhere. Do you think that this year there will be enough attempts to feed everyone?
I think Eric's rushing attempt total is a little bit high. But I think his receptions might even be a bit low. I think he catches 50, 54 balls.
Yeah, that is one of the most barren depth charts outside of Mr. Train himself.
Yeah, so even if the attempts go way down, there's only a few options.
And I'm not as big of a believer in Carlos Hyde as it sounds like you two are.
You know what? For the 49ers, should it be running trolley? Just to make it a little more family friendly. He's gonna run trolley.
All right, Scott, tell everybody where they can find your work. And I know it's a lot of different places.
Sure. Coming up next month.
He's going through the list right now.
Yeah, get my papers out. Now, at Scottfish24, you can find pretty much everything I'm doing. But coming up next month, Fanball will launch my it's soft launch now. You can go to fanball.com and see what we're about. But next month, you'll see a whole bunch of my writing, which a lot of people have not seen for a couple of years. So it's been pretty fun getting back on the horse.
Well, come on, tell us more. Where can they find the Fantasy Cares leagues?
Oh, fantasycares.net if you want to help me buy some toys for kids. Scottfishbowl.com if you want to try and play this year. It's really, there's almost no spots left. There's last I checked, over 5,400 people signed up for it. So next year might be a better chance. And the best way to get in there is fantasycares.net best ball satellites.
You do so much awesome work, Scott. You're one of the genuinely nicest guys in the community.
Thank you,
as Eric said before you came on, if there's a Dynasty Mount Rushmore, you're definitely on it. And we're so happy to have you on. We're so happy to hear about the success that you've been receiving with the fan ball and the success that the Scott Fishbowl has had recently, and the success of getting money for the Fantasy Cares, because that's definitely a good cause. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right, cool. We'll definitely have you on more now that you're doing the fantasy thing for a living. So go follow Scott at ScottFish24. Check out all of his mini podcasts, all of his work on Fanball. Check out Eric at EDH_27. You can follow me at Carl Safchik. Everybody rate, review, subscribe to the pod. Check us out if you want to be a new writer, and have a good week. All right, guys, that was a fun show.
Awesome. Yeah, that was fun.
That was awesome. I don't know. There's something super invigorating of like trying to come up with stuff on the spot.
Yeah.
Like that cliffhanger thing. I just kept thinking of them, and I'm like, I don't know when to jump in because I have another one. Oh, that's a good game. I like that.
Yeah, no, that was definitely good.
Yeah. Eric, last night I texted him, what do you want to do for the show? I can't remember the exact text, but you said something about cliffhangers, and I'm like, oh, Dynasty cliffhangers. This could be
there.
Cool.
It is. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks again. This is great. I'll have to get you